the world ain't all sunshine and rainbows. It's a mean and nasty place, and I don't care how tough you are, it will beat you to your knees and keep you there permanently if you let it.
Welcome to the InsideOutrz podcast with me, Danny Lloyd, the man that put the I in addict and now takes the Y into you.
And it's your boy, the Lock Dog. What is happening?
What is crack-a-lacking today, Lock Dog, and who do we have
special
here?
Happening today?
There is something special. We have a gentleman to my right-hand side with a phenomenal story of tragedy to triumph to inspire the rest of our Inside Out fam to believe in better for themselves. Mr. Oli.
How you going?
What's happening, brother?
Not much. Very excited to be here.
We're excited to have you. Tell us your name and what you're about, brother.
Yeah, so Oli G, Oli Grandy, whatever's easy. But yeah, first of all, just before I talk about myself, just want to say thank you to you guys, Danny and Jordan, for having me on here. I've been following you guys' series, and it's pretty cool to actually be sitting here. So
it's only because you deserve to be here, brother. It's only because you deserve to be here, and we're looking forward very much to delving into all of that. Before I proceed with this episode, I would just like to acknowledge and thank our sponsors, Killer Moe's Australia and 5starclassified.com for their continued support of our podcast and helping us to grow our message. Killer Moe's provides great quality clothing with proceeds going to charitable causes. There will be a link in the description, so please give Dan Smith and Killer Moe's a follow. Check them out on Instagram and Facebook. And thanks to our new sponsor from all the way across the pond in USA, Mr. Ryan Ferrari at 5starclassified.com, which is an online community that prides themselves on no censorship. Buy and sell the items you want for only 99 cents. We'll provide the link in the description. It's a great platform.
Wow, there you
it
go.
Definitely is. All right, let's continue on.
Awesome.
All right, Oli.
Yep.
For us to understand a bit about who you are and where you come from and who you are today, can you tell us a bit about your past and where it all began?
Yeah, so not from Adelaide. Never thought I'd end up here. It's actually been a real nice surprise living here in Adelaide. But to take it all the way back to the beginning, I was born in Melbourne back in 97. So, mum and dad. Mum was from the country, dad was sort of from Melbourne, and they got together and had me as the eldest. And shout out to my mum and dad. I'm honestly blessed to have two really awesome parents, Tim and Jackie, and I've got two little brothers. Shout out to them as well. My little brother Danny, just like this guy, and my youngest one Hamish. So they're both doing really well, and yeah, that's my little family. We started out in Melbourne 2005 when I was 8 years old. Off the back of some really heavy family drama situations, we moved up to Brisbane. So yeah, the family had just gone through a really tough time, and it was, won't go into too much detail, but it was time to try something out, try something new. And my dad got a job up in Brisbane, so went from cold, rainy Melbourne to sunny Brisbane. I remember when we first got there, house had palm trees out the front and a pool out the back, and it was so different. That's where I grew up for 15 years of my life until moving here 4 years ago. So 8 years in Melbourne, 15 in Brizzy, and been here for almost 4. So
just a bit of a interstate warrior, really, just flexing around. And that must have been quite a culture shock, going from Melbourne to all the way up into the tropics.
Yes. Oh, it was. Yeah. Like Melbourne was all footy and had so much family there. And then we're up in this place that was just so sunny and different and no family. But yeah, loved it. Loved Brizzy, and they're my three favourite cities. Adelaide's my favourite now, I have to say, but love Brisbane and Melbourne. So sorry to the rest, but yeah, they're my three favourite spots.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, interesting. All right, brother. Tell us a bit about growing up from as far back as you can remember. We'll go Queensland because Melbourne's a bit cold, wet and weird.
And I was only, like I said, I left when I was 8, so my memories there were pretty pretty minimal anyway. But yeah, growing up in Brisbane was great. It's a great culture up there. Great thing about Brisbane is it's different to most cities because it kind of runs north to south alongside adjacent to the ocean. So you've got the north side, and then further than that, you've got Sunny Coast, which is one of the most beautiful places in the world. And then south of South Brisbane is Gold Coast, and then a little bit further is Byron Bay. So you go, top to bottom, you've just got so much to explore. And so living there was awesome. The lifestyle is so great because you get to be outdoors so much. And, I started playing footy when I was there for the Kimwell Bears and played there. And that was one of my biggest passions growing up, was just footy.
I'm going to guess you were a ruckman.
It's surprising. I'm 6'5" now,
Correct.
but growing up, I was actually just medium. So I was
okay.
I was always a little sneaky little forward.
So you're a late bloomer.
Late bloomer, yeah. It was like grade 11.
They're normally the most successful people, by the way. Every one of the people in this room, including Big Dan Dog in the back there, who's come along today, Mr. Dan Mulvihill, we're all late bloomers.
That's it.
Well, apart from the Lock Dog, who somehow managed to pull out the early bloomer card, and he's probably going to become more successful than any of us.
Are we talking late blooming in terms of
like age
career success?
Yeah,
or?
kind of like going, well, you're not actually that old either, are you, Ollie?
26.
Oh,
same as you, hey?
No, because you...
Sorry, Dan, it's just me and Dan here, then at 40.
You were saying born in 97?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm 95. Yeah.
Okay, similar age.
Yeah.
But yeah, like size-wise, I'm pretty big now. But yeah, it was like even until late high school, I was just medium. And so with the footy, it was the same thing. I was kind of not small, but I wasn't tall either. So
that's interesting. Did you get treated at school in a certain way because you weren't a big guy then? Was there anything from being not the runt? I guess you wouldn't have been the runt of the litter though, right? You were just kind of average?
Yeah, very sporty. Like, I was always one of the quicker kids in the school, and yeah, felt like, but yeah, I'd always bite off a little bit more than I could chew when it came to footy, and even getting into scuffles and stuff like that.
Okay.
Wasn't afraid to take on someone bigger, but yeah, definitely thought I was bigger
so
than I was.
So you grew into your attitude.
That's it. That's it.
Quick to go, slow to grow.
That's it.
No, don't go there. Carry on. Move forward. Sorry, my brain went somewhere else there for a sec.
But moving on.
Fucking back in my box.
To tell us a little bit about the family.
Yeah, so like I mentioned briefly earlier, I've got great parents, and I'm, I can't be more grateful. It's such a blessing to have great parents. I know a lot of people don't, especially in the field that I work in now. It's something that's really evident. A lot of people, lower, middle, upper class, it doesn't matter. Unfortunately, there's a lot of parents out there that don't care or get very distracted with their own things, and I can sit here and say, like, both my parents, despite making mistakes, they tried so hard and loved me a lot. My mum, like I said, was from the country. She was one of 6 girls, the eldest. Kind of grew up in that strict Catholic sort of background, and moved into the city and was very artistic and went to Japan and, did all these crazy things. And then my dad, on the flip side, his dad's Canadian, so he grew up playing ice hockey and represented the state and was just really into sports. I think that's where I get part of that from. My granddad actually captained the Australian ice hockey team to the Olympics back in the 60s.
Wow.
So a lot of sporting side in my family. And
that's like on some Cool Runnings thing. Like,
yeah,
Australia, always sunny, but went to the ice hockey Olympics.
Yeah, so he was Canadian, my granddad, but he moved over, became a lifeguard at Bondi, quit hockey. So he was actually in the Detroit Red Wings under 20. So he was like, an aspiring player, but kind of just missed out on the NHL. Moved here because he thought, whatever, I'll go, find some nice Aussie ladies and work and all that. And then they said, well, they found out about him, and then they got him in, and he was obviously the best player over here. So he was the captain.
Oh, the
and
NHL's
coach
no joke. So I'm a big hockey fan.
Yeah.
I don't talk about it much, but like I'm a Vancouver Canucks fan.
Yeah.
So that's no joke, man, to have been close to the NHL.
He was from Toronto and, country boy himself, and came over, and he's had a big part to do with Australian ice hockey. And my dad obviously played a lot, but my uncle played for Australia as well. And so, yeah, the only reason I wasn't really able to play much was because it was just really expensive, to get all those new, gear that they wear every year. It's like hard to...
It's a lot.
Yeah.
Like it's like NFL. Well, it's even more, actually. It's like a full bodysuit and everything.
Yeah, it's
like
thousands of dollars.
It's hectic.
Yeah. So,
I've got no idea.
Okay, well.
Don't watch it.
Anyway.
Don't follow it.
Anyway.
but yeah, like that was sort of, my parents, both very different. They were, my mum had me when she was 24. So, sort of youngish parents. And yeah, our family was the biggest thing, most noticeable thing about us from the outside would have been, we went to church. We were a Christian family, and my parents tried really hard to instill those values in us. Not forcefully, which I'm grateful for, because I know a lot of people feel like when they grow up, there's a big expectation to be, follow that religion, where it was less about the cultural side, but, they took it seriously. But it wasn't overbearing. I felt like I had the choice. And yeah, at times I didn't agree with it and wanted to go my own way, but I loved going to church. My church wasn't, a boring church like some people will talk about. There was other young kids there and young people and older guys that I looked up to. So that was a big part of my upbringing, was the church. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
I was just wondering, I can't remember if you mentioned it, but do you have siblings?
Yeah, 2 little brothers.
2 little brothers.
Yeah.
That's
I
right.
say little,
yeah,
but
you
they're
did
big boys
say
now.
At the beginning, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So that was a big part of my upbringing as well. Like having, 3 boys under 5, and you've got 3. We're all into sport. We're all, just hectic. Growing up, it was just the boys. And being the oldest, I was sort of had to be the leader and lead the way. And sometimes I was a good example. Unfortunately, a lot of the time I wasn't always, and we had a lot of fights and just got up to mischief. But I wouldn't, change it. It was so good. Like, obviously, my grandma always lived out in the country where my mum was from, and we'd go out there and just run amok and, go hunting and just run around. And yeah, that's one of my most, memorable parts of my childhood and upbringing was just being with my brothers, just running amok.
Yeah, cool. I don't have that reference point. I was an only child. I'm sure you have that reference point with obviously Brighton, growing up as a brother.
Yeah, it wasn't only child. I got 2 younger siblings, but so I've got my youngest sister's the youngest.
Yep.
And we're like 9, almost 10 years apart, so massive age difference. But I got my younger brother. He's the middle child.
Yep.
He does have that syndrome.
Yeah.
He's not quite 3 years younger than me, but yeah, he's I won't say black sheep. He's a rainbow sheep of the family.
Yeah, I remember you talking about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
The rainbow sheep.
Yeah.
My middle brother Danny, he was definitely the middle child. He was super naughty growing up. I was always having to pull him out of fights in school. He was that kid that one day rang the emergency bell in the middle of exams, and the whole school got put onto the oval, and everyone's like, I want to get your brother. And I stood there and went, nope, no one's touching my brother. But then surprisingly, come end of school or a couple of years after, he went and got a degree, and now he's doing really well. He's in the marketing game and works for a successful company up in Brisbane. So he's like the classic comeback story, started out as the super rebellious, super, butts in some sort of character, and then was always super bright. And then so once he, focused on something, which wasn't being a menace, he was just super, he's done really well.
He was fronting as Bart, but he was really deep down Lisa.
Exactly. There's something in that. He's, he does really well. I'm super proud of my little brother and look up to him in some ways. He's an awesome guy.
I mean, he pretty much physically would look up to you though. I mean, you're 6'5".
He does. He's 6'2". But
I forgot how tall you were actually, because we've met before this podcast. And I actually forgot you are a big unit.
Yeah, they were similar height.
Yeah, you're a big unit.
And then the younger brother, a little bit on him, Hamish. He's a big...
Hammers.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, Hammers. He's awesome too. And he was always punching above his weight. He was actually, we talked about how I was a bit small. He was really small. Okay. So he was, I remember watching him play rugby, and he was playing as a hooker in the front row at school.
Yeah.
And he was definitely the smallest kid out there, but was taking down anybody. And I've always thought, well, he had 2 older brothers to practice on.
Well, and there's an art to actually tackling in rugby. Like, you don't have to be big.
Yep.
You just need to know how to tackle.
Yep.
Like, there really is an art form to it. People don't understand it. They just think it's all these Neanderthals just like sniffing each other's bums and like, but it's actually not like that. So I was a rugby player. Like, I was 160 kilos back then. And there wasn't muscle. That was just pure blubber.
Big unit.
But yeah, I was the opposite to you. From 12 years old, I was already 6 foot and 130 kilos.
Jeepers.
I played under 12s and all the way through in the rugby. And my mum had to bring a birth certificate to every game because the parents of the opposition wouldn't let me play against their little precious stick insects because I'd just smash them.
That happens over here with a lot of the islanders in Australia and New Zealand. So
so I'm actually technically an islander. Like, so your reference point in the Southern Hemisphere is islanders such as Samoans now. But I'm actually an islander. I'm from an island.
What's it called? Guernsey?
Guernsey. Guernsey, the Channel Islands. So like that I'm an islander.
Yeah.
So that's where the
big islander over here.
Must have been just a big islander.
just not Polynesian.
Nah, not
completely different.
No, not at all.
Yeah, but that was my younger brother Hamish. Like he was just so brave.
Shout out to Hammers.
Oh mate,
I love the word Hammers.
He's a legend. But this fella, he's the shortest. He's only about 6 foot.
Yeah.
But he's gotten huge. He's like Danny over here. He's a beast in the gym.
Yeah.
He can bench press double his weight. He's a big boy now, and he plays rugby, footy, and
nice.
He is hammers. He goes in hard, and he's doing really well himself, studying and stuff like that. So
So I guess then, realistically, understanding what would sound like and was and clearly is still to you a beautiful existence to grow up in. Much the same as myself.
Yeah.
You know, we didn't have anything, but much. But, you know, my grandpa, the parents and my mum gave me everything they could. So then it really leads me to understand then, which is partly why you're here today, to help our viewers believe in themselves. Like when we first met, me, you and Jordan a while back, you mentioned you had a colourful past, you know, substance use, addiction, antisocial behaviours, all of the colourful things that bring our Inside Out fam together. So how did that come about when you've just painted what sounds like the perfect family upbringing and was?
Yeah, sometimes I've asked myself this question a lot. I think the important first thing I'd say is, like any family, you know what I mean? Like we were far from perfect, you know, and I'm one of those people that when I look back, I love to always dwell on a lot of the positives. I think my mind does that subconsciously, likes to just align all the positives and sort of put a lot of the negatives and tough times in its place, you know, and not let it have too much power, you know, and because, you know, it's like anything, you know, any person that's in your life, if you focus on the worst thing they did to you, well, then that's where you're going to start and finish, you know, and it's the same with my parents and my brothers. You know, me and my brothers had some huge blowouts. My parents, we had some really tough times, you know, and so as much as I love to focus on the positives, there was, you know, equally a lot of hardship. And I'm not sitting here trying to say that I grew up super rough or anything like that at all. It was something I'm really grateful for, my upbringing. But yeah, just wanted to highlight that it, you know, it still was realistically, you know, like anyone, you know, had its ups and downs. But still, you know, how did I get to, you know, my lowest point, probably, which was around 19 to 20, you know, is when I was really, really, like you say, living a colourful life. I think it actually started back probably when I first started going to high school. I was thinking about this today. It was, you know, first thing I got into with my mates was skateboarding. And skateboarding is a great sport to get involved in, don't get me wrong. But most people who have sort of gotten into it know that it comes with an introduction to the streets, you know, and that's sort of what happened with me. Is started off as very innocent, going to the skate park on a Saturday or an afternoon with my mates and, you know, doing your tricks and making your videos. But, you know, you're 13, 14 and then you see these group of older boys, you know, skating, but then going off into the bushes and it's like, well, I don't think they're going there to, you know, just have a chat. What are they doing? And then you slowly realise, oh, they're smoking weed and, oh, you know, who does all this graffiti at the skate park? Oh, it's those guys. And the skate park, there's always a contingency of people there, at least from my experience, who aren't there to skate. They're there to act tough. You know, they're wearing TNs or Air Maxes. You can't skate in those shoes. So why are they there? And it's because it's a place to hang out. And so where I grew up in Brisbane, I grew up around sort of the Kenmore Indooroopilly area, which was, you know, pretty populated, sort of, you know, big shops there and stuff like that. But then another sort of 20 minutes down the road, there was this really isolated suburb called Bellbarry, but it had a really good skate park. And all the people from that area, which was a little bit rougher, they all went to the same high school as us. So there was my little sort of Kenmore boys, and then we eventually met the Bellbarry boys, and we became one big crew, you know, and we'd go out there because that was the closest big skate park. We'd be out there most afternoons on the weekends, and that's where I kind of got introduced to just being aware of those things. initially not really getting involved. But yeah, I remember with some of those guys going to school, on the way to school, we'd start stealing things. And to be completely honest, I wasn't really the best skater, especially as I got a bit taller. I was just sort of more into the filming and going along with the crew. And so I started thinking, well, why don't I be the best at stealing? Why don't I be the best at rapping? Why don't I be the best at other things? Being tough, if we get into trouble with the crew, who's going to stand up? And because I'd sort of been at church and I had a lot of my mates who were Islander, and played a bit of sport, I kind of took on that role. And we'd travel all over the city and you'd get into trouble going through the city in Brisbane and stuff like that. So that was the introduction to it. I think where it became more about who I was and it really became me, getting into, obviously more into the street was probably around the age of 16, 17, that fascination with hip hop became something I was really passionate about. Started off just as rapping, but you listen to hip hop music and we all know what it's about. It's about the streets for the most part. And so I started thinking about that, those things started really seeping into my conscious, you hear someone rap about, someone mess with you, what are you going to do? Stand up for yourself. And then when it happens, you do it, you know what I mean? And that's what I started doing. And I realized, hey, I'm actually pretty tough. I thought I was at the time. Looking back, I sort of laugh about it. But, a few of my mates from church, some of those young Islander boys really had my back. And within my sort of skate crew, I thought I was pretty tough. And that was sort of the, I guess you could say, where I sort of took a turn from wanting to be maybe that son that my parents would have exactly wanted me to be, which probably would have just been a footy player and go to church and a family man, to sort of, creep it into the streets and eventually, really getting into the thick of it, being drawn to the guys that were actually committing proper crime, not just stealing from the shops, guys that were getting into the harder drugs, that were rolling people and stuff like that. And by the time I was 17, 18, I was hanging around, within Brisbane, some of the tougher guys, so yeah.
It's interesting because the Lock Dog is the same age as you and you had quite a big Islander community and knew a lot of Islanders in your neck of the woods in Mildura too. Is that correct?
Yeah. It's funny, I was just hearing your
story.
There's
a lot of similarities,
It actually reminds me a lot of, even growing up in Victoria. A lot of my friends were Polynesian or Aboriginal or, it's pretty cultural diverse community.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of where things started to go wrong for me was the skate park.
Yeah.
It seems to be where all the wankers kind of come together. Yeah, some good people there, but there's also a lot of dickheads there.
The dudes that are there to skate are were some of the most positive and best mates I had.
Yeah.
It was the dudes.
Yeah, I
that
was
were
going to
there
say, because there's another thing that I was raising in my head was, so me and Danos here are a different age bracket. So my skate park times, there was no TMs, there was just skaters. Like there was none of what you're describing. They were just skaters. Yeah, there was none of this, we're going to go there and be mischievous with the skaters. So I found that really interesting that this crossover for your generation was that there was two groups of people really there. There was the intentionally good ones that were actually practicing the culture. And then there was the people that were pretending to practice the culture and were actually just practicing how to influence young people.
And then there ended up being a real crossover. But by the time we got to 15, 16, there were some boys who were skating, but were also graphing and, getting into the drugs. So there was almost, thirds, and you had to sort of step in. And I think I just eventually started associating with not all of them, but some of the dudes my age that were more into the graffiti, and I got pretty heavily into that because, hip hop culture, people think it's just the rapping, but
no, it's a full. Do you have graph in Mildura?
Yeah, man, it was kind of like, so I think maybe to paint a good picture is you'd have the skate park, you have all these people that attend the skate park, the skaters, the guys that are on the BMXs and in my time scooters.
Yep.
But you had cliques at the park. You'd have those that just kind of there just skating for the pure joy of it. You have those there that would also be skating, but they're all about, smoking weed, drinking. There'd also be the few people there that you could send to the shop to just buy drinks and stuff, everyone, but then they would also rack a heap of stuff as well. They were just those guys. They're like, yeah, here's your things, also racked a heap of stuff for me, pulling shit out of their pants.
Yep.
And then you have the other guys that just come down with all the beers, all the drinks, getting fucking hammered, drinking. And then I'd seen it progress into, you have those there twirling the pipes.
Yeah.
Just
dark,
out of public view, yeah. And then, on the BMXs, try and do backflips and all the things, just having time of their life.
Yeah, it's honestly very similar. It mirrors exactly what my experience was out in Bellbarry. And we called it the B-Town, like we repped it, and as much as there were people in those different groups, sometimes even the most straighty 180 skater would also, he'd be all right with some of these guys. And the sad thing is, just touching on it, I think at the time we had a great time, and a few of my mates made some really good skate clips out of it. And we look back and we look at that history, and there's some really fun times. But something recently, one of my mates who was one of the main filmers, he's actually over in Canada snowboarding, and we had this really deep chat about, we were watching the videos and we were pointing out some of the younger guys, a little bit younger than us, that we knew were going down that path. They were almost outcast within their own age group, but they'd come and they'd tag along, and the skate park was at least one place where they had some belonging. And the sad part is, a couple of those guys have committed suicide.
Wow.
A couple of them are locked up at a young age, and a couple of them have just, quite honestly gone right off the rails. And we look back and we had a conversation about it, was there more that we could do? Were we being good influences? And I think we sort of settled on the fact that we were looking out for them. But sometimes there's, we're not at that time mentors or, or able to have as much of an influence. But if they, and sometimes we remember back, breaking fights up and being there to support in some way. And so I think we did a lot, but it was almost just sad looking back and seeing that some of these guys slipped through the cracks.
So it was influence.
Big time. Well, it was an environment where, the funny thing is like I said earlier, you'd see that group of 15, 16-year-old boys who at the time were older than me going off to smoke. But then sometimes you'd see an 11 or 12-year-old tagging along because his older brother was one of them, they'd been around it since they were even younger. So it's interesting looking back. It didn't happen overnight. Some of these particular guys, for one reason or not, got introduced even younger. So by the time they were 15, 16, like Jordan mentioned, they're on the gear. You know what I mean? And that's where wrong age, wrong friendship group and environment where you can get your hands on whatever, and it can end pretty badly.
So when did it really escalate for you?
It was actually, for me, not actually directly in that group. I think that group introduced me to a lot of things. For me, it was when I started hanging out in the city. My parents were aware of that and really didn't like how drastically my behaviour changed when I started hanging in the city. That was an environment on a whole nother level to the skate park. I sort of, one particular mate of mine, one of my brothers, Dwayne, he wouldn't mind me mentioning his name. I'd met him at the skate park. But he was one of those guys that completely disappeared. He wasn't even around. Nobody knew what was going on apart from, I think he's really going down a hectic path. And I remember just walking through the city one day because I just moved out of home at the age of 17 and I was living closer to the city. And I bumped into him, and when I saw his crew and the way they were rolling, I was like, this is where I belong. These are the dudes graphing. These are the dudes wearing the clothes that I'm wearing. This is it, And I quickly clicked with those guys, and those 4 or 5 guys, there was a bigger surrounding group, a massive community of different groups in the city, but that little group that I found right there, that became my family for the next couple of years. That's where things really escalated for me. I started around 18, 19 smoking weed really heavily. I know sometimes it sounds a bit trivial, the good old just weed, but for me it became a big thing, and what comes with that is obviously, deals and, the people that you do that with. And that was us. We were in the city, the botanical gardens, which are right in the middle of the city, smoking weed during the middle of the day. We were brazen. We were just having fun. We were just living it up, and we'd go there, we'd smoke, we'd walk around the city. There were other groups. There was a lot of young Polynesian kids there doing the whole Bloods and Crips thing and, running around, just robbing people. And then there was a whole bunch of older people. In every city, I think there's a bit of an underbelly of, the proper criminals. And we were sort of the young guns, 18, 19, in our prime, not afraid to, do anything. So even when we'd see big groups of people, 6 or 7 of us, we didn't care. We really feared nobody. And I was talking to a friend about it, one of my mates from church, because we were walking through the city the other day through Hindley, and there was all sorts of stuff going on. And he was so shocked by it. I said,
It's a random place, Harley Street. We you could sit there and just do a social science experiment on that place.
Yep.
Like
It's like Wonderland, man. You just go down the rabbit hole and there's Harley Street.
in Brisbane, what you got is a suburb of Hindley Street, which is Fortitude Valley, and that's attached to the city.
Yeah, I've heard of Fortitude Valley. We actually, me and Jordan, when we used to run the meth program, had people that used to fly in from all over the country to it. And one particular lad that you'll remember well, George, from Ipswich.
Yep.
But yeah, Fortitude Valley. You can't forget old mate.
There's no fortitude out there, bro. It's
Violence.
Yeah, rugby
Yeah.
player kind of used to be.
All right, yeah. Well, it's definitely a breeding ground for dickheads too.
Yeah.
It's hectic. It's the clubbing district down there, but during the day it's like Hindley, but just imagine that, but a whole precinct of it. And that's attached right on the city, and the city's a lot bigger than Adelaide.
Yeah.
And then you've got Spring Hill, you've got South Bank, it's a much bigger metropolis, and so there's just so much more area to get up to mischief. A lot more crime goes on there. There was young boys that I knew, because I was pretty tight with that whole young Polynesian community. To this day, some of them have turned their life around, or some haven't, but I keep in contact and look out for them a bit. And some of them back in the day would go out to the suburbs, steal a car, drive into the city just to show off. So the main spot we used to chill at was King George Square, right in the middle. That's where all the crews would be, and the police hated it because we'd all congregate there. And then it'd be like, oh, so-and-so's about to drive through, and they'd speed through in a Mercedes just to show off. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's no brains behind that crime. It's like, if you've got a hot car and you drive through the city, you're probably going to get pinched. But it was just that idea of who's the hecticest, who's the craziest. And so, yeah, I saw a lot in the city, and obviously after hours, real late in the night when I'd be out there, you see some stuff that really changes you, and not even stuff that I was directly involved with. Sometimes, yes, but just the emptiness out there, obviously at that time, and still to this day, the ice and the heroin was really big, and you just see it spilling onto the streets at all hours of the night, and it definitely changes you seeing it up close.
It's even worse today, don't you think? Like, just the way the youth are. It's one thing to steal a car and show off and smoke a bit of weed in the city and hang out in a group, but now it's like, you get stabbed in the throat just for walking in the city.
Well, that happened in Fortitude Valley. I think a lot of people saw that footage of that big Islander boy squaring up with someone. A blade came out and got him in the jugular, and he was out in 10 seconds. And that circulated a lot only a few months ago. So it doesn't matter how big and tough you are these days. Like little piece of metal in the wrong place, and you're gone. And I think I saw that, and I just thought, like, it almost brought back a bit of trauma. Like, yeah, I used to see those things get brought out. But you're right, it's escalating.
We had massive issues with that in Britain for decades now. Knife crime, massive issues, because we don't really have guns. And yous don't really, ever since the Port Arthur thing.
Massacre, yeah.
Port Arthur, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, go. I knew I was a citizen.
Down in Tassie.
Did my history.
Was that on the test?
No, hopefully not, but I was just thinking.
It's concerning, man, because it's almost like today, it looks as though it's trending.
Yeah.
Like back then, most of us would hang out on the street because home was shit, man. Like, no one wants to be at home. Like, parents are doing drugs, or it's just, domestic violence. And you would do dumb shit on the street, but, you weren't just randomly violent towards people.
No.
I think hip-hop has a lot to do with it.
I think it does, especially the new stuff, to be honest. I mean, like, no offense to any of the new ones, but people like Husky and that, it's not great what they're saying in their lyrics. Like, they're great lyricists. That's fine. But this is what all the kids or the young people are listening to, are the likes of Husky and Enter and many others, like even remember that King AK dude?
Yeah.
What the fuck was that about? The ex-bikey lad, like, with all the tats. And then he had that other Gronk that used to do the stuff with him, and when I say Gronk, this lad was just not a healthy person to be listening to. I can't remember his name now, but he was up in Queensland way too.
Yeah,
big meathead looking geezer.
There's, and I think that the problem is no one's really held accountable.
Nah.
I think, to look at Husky just quickly, because I had a bit of a friendship with him, being, obviously we'll talk about a bit more, but being in the scene, I kind of knew of him, and when he'd come to town, I was, on a name-to-name basis with him, and he was just going through it, and his music was a reflection of his addiction.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
He's a great lyricist. It's just that if that's what we are feeding our own minds, then that's what we'll become.
Yep.
It's a catch-22.
Yep.
It's like that was helping him through. And that's great that then people can listen to it and hear that helped him through.
Yep.
But if they do not have the narrative of that was used to help him through, and they think he's glorifying Xannies, lean, and all the other stuff, which is what the perception can be, then that's the problem.
He accidentally probably glamorized that life a bit.
That's what I'm saying. It's accidental. I'm not saying he meant it. It's just that the kids are not thinking for themselves. So they just listen to it and go, oh yeah, well, sound up fucking Husky, man, he's sick, yeah, like just do what Husky and even old mate, what's his name, Cursor, like, you know, I know he's pulled his head in with it now and says I don't like that stuff, but he's got a lot to answer for in his early days. I'm sorry, but he does. Yeah. He's got a lot to answer for with how he glorified. He was like the Eminem of Australia in the early days. He had everyone's attention that were from low socioeconomic backgrounds, and he did nothing but glamorize shit.
Yeah, it's such an interesting topic, man. And I know even Husky, something that he did was he put a video out because he had young kids, you know, messaging him saying, hey, I did this much drugs, or, oh, you know, I did this or I did that. And he just turned around, and I think it was a bit of a moment for him where he was like, wow, like, guys, like, yeah, I put this stuff on my music, but do you know what I mean? Like, I think he was kind of realizing that, yes, he was putting it out there raw and, you know, in its full view, but he didn't realize that someone would actually take that and use that as inspiration to, you know, get stuck on the drugs you mentioned. And I think with Cursor as well, he's obviously, you know, taken time to evolve as a man. And
he has now, 100%.
But I honestly, and he copped a lot, you know, like there was always the, oh yeah, Cursor's the sickest, and the guy's done 10 albums. He got a house out of rap, you know, and I don't disagree with what you're saying early on.
I'm just talking early days.
Yeah.
When he didn't know any different either, right?
Well, it's one thing most of these guys have in common. They don't understand the psychology of youth.
No.
Yeah.
You know, like for them, the world's their diary, and I'm going to spit into it. And, you know, they forget that there's an easily influenced youth demographic in that diary.
Yeah.
You know, and they just soak it all up.
Definitely.
And it's kind of like the social media influencers, and, you know, you got shit ones, you got great ones, and they either sending a message, whether it's good or bad is that's social media. But it's the same with rap. Like, it's an influence.
Yeah.
You know, like Whitney Houston in her prime would have been an influence in
very
some
true.
things when it came to emotions when they listen to the music. And it's the same with like rap artists. Like, they influence and kind of play on the emotions of youth.
Yeah, that's very true.
And every single one of the guys we've mentioned, they were all influenced themselves.
Of course they would have been.
Yeah.
Of course they would have
Like,
been.
there's no rule book. Like, you don't go to a record label and they're like, all right, so when it comes to rap, you can hit these things. And when it comes to the psychology of influence, you can't do that. No one says that. It's like, that sounds great. Let's put it out.
So, anyway, we've a bit segued there on rap politics. Don't
mind it.
But no, I don't mind it. But just to keep us on track here today, tell us about that lowest point of your life then, I guess, in relation to you've transitioned into the streets of Brisbane. You are now smoking extreme amounts of marijuana. You're hanging out in the city, and you're hanging around a group of people that, by the sounds of what you're saying, were into some pretty heavy shit. And we haven't even got into, so then your transition from weed to ice?
No, I luckily never touched it.
Never touched ice?
No, I never touched it.
So it was just the weed?
To sort of go right into that, it was all around me, you know.
I was going to say, it would have been all around you.
Yeah, you know, and not people aren't just smoking it, but burning it up and I just saw it firsthand, ravaging everything around me. And there's plenty of opportunities, you know what I mean? But I think the big thing to remember, going back to my upbringing, I kind of had these boundaries, you know what I mean? And obviously kept pushing them further and further back. But I got to a point where I thought, you know, like, that's one thing that I'm not, and I was actually never attracted to it. I think that the thing is, a lot of people sort of get into it before they even get a chance to see how evil it is, where I probably, because of my parents and, you know, some of that goodness that had sort of stayed there, it gave me enough of a buffer to go, why would I? You know what I mean? And I had low points, and there was moments where I thought, maybe if I do this, I could be cooler, I could fully understand why they're doing it. But I luckily never did. I definitely tried other drugs though. It wasn't just weed. You know, I tried a few other things, and you know, like MDMA, which really is an amphetamine as well, and it gives you a pretty good idea of, you know, well, ice is going to be
Gives you a quick version.
Yeah,
Gives you just an overnight version of what it does. I mean, it leaves your brain so empty,
yeah,
dumb in the head afterwards.
yep.
It's unbelievable. I might as well just walk into fucking walls after taking MDMA the next day. It's pretty
bad.
brain emptying.
Leaves you scattered, and you know, and the thing that was really evident to me, and this, I don't know where this metaphor, this analogy came from, but for me, I kind of eventually started to look at drugs as almost like credit cards, and there were different levels of credit cards, because what I saw was people were taking so much. So, you know, if you have like you've said, MDMA, that's obviously just a medium level, but then obviously on the gear or whatever, in that 3-4 day bender, they're taking so much. They're taking so much, you know, perceived happiness, good times. There's all this energy. There's all this, just wave of emotions. And as we know, you know, ice takes a heap of dopamine out of you. So it's take. Eventually, when you knock out, what do you have to do? You have to pay it back. You know, and I was seeing that as well. I was dealing with my mates. Sometimes I preferred to deal with them on it rather than when they were coming off it or they were scattered, because it was just like talking to a zombie. I had a couple of mates in particular, and I don't want to shame them out, but dealing with them on the come down and even the couple of days after was super frustrating. You know, like, you know, we'd talk about just wanting to just do something as easy as go and have lunch. And we'd get there and it's like, oh, I don't have my wallet, can you pay for me? And so I was dealing really with all aspects of it without actually using it. And I can say that.
You kind of had a measuring stick of what would be ahead if you went there.
Exactly.
In a way.
It's mad because the way you describe it is how I very much think of it in my head.
Yep.
You know, like I had all my friends around me using it, and I was like, man, this is, yeah, like I'm all for trying things. I'm like, yous look absolutely... gone.
Yep.
And then, you know, I had my younger brother living with me also, you know, like back in my teens. And I used to find him, you know, he'd be up at stupid hours of the night, just like rapping and staring up at the ceiling, laying in bed, like, I wake up like, man, just shut up. Like, what are you doing? What's wrong with you? And it took me ages to really clue on to, you know, this is that drug.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh no, man, I'm on the ice. And I just remember, like, I'd gone laid back in bed after that conversation. I'm like the older brother, and I feel like I failed as a protector.
Yeah.
Like, that drug and me, never going to mix.
Yeah. So in a different way, we kind of had our own conviction on it, you know, that we wouldn't want to go there. And I'm really glad, because I kind of also had another scarier thought, like, all right, well, these guys, that's them, you know, when they're on it, that's this version of them, and that's pretty hard to watch. It's, you know, not a good look. What am I going to be like? You know, knowing my personality, you know, I was always the joker in the bunch, you know, having a joke and talking enough as it was. So I thought, jeepers, me, you know, if I was to get on it, you know, people would probably just hate me, you know what I mean? Like, I just could see that it always brought out this ugly version of people that they didn't want to, you know, put out there. You know, there's obviously moments where you'd see, I don't know, you know, if you've ever tried to play someone in pool when they're on it, it's hard. It's like they're on a performance-enhancing drug. You know, there's almost a funny side to it where in these rare moments it helps people achieve small things like clean the house and whatever, but the negatives are just so much, you know what I mean? Like, and so those very, very minuscule positives just sort of just...
It's because most of people, a lot of people, I believe, that end up addicted to ice have some form of ADHD. And with ADHD, you don't know how to have delayed gratification in your life. You only know instant gratification.
Yep.
So they take the drug for those small wins, forgetting that the delayed ungratification is the complete shit show of 23.5 hours of the day.
Yeah. So I'd almost get tricked into sort of seeing that sometimes, you know what I mean? Like, mates freestyling on it, and, you know, like, there's almost that slight moment where you think, oh, you see that slight benefit of it. Like, there is a reason why so many young people are doing it. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think people forget that it's, you know, it's not just how good it feels, it's everything that comes with it, what they're able to do, and in that, like you said, that small window. So, but to get back to your sort of question, for me, obviously crime came into it as well. Mainly the graffiti side of things, but with what comes with that scene is violence and sort of rolling together and other crews and that all became right at the forefront. And I just, just so much, and it was authentic in a sense, but I was just so entrenched in that hip hop culture. I just felt like and wanted to be just hip hop, you know what I mean? And obviously rapping was the main thing for me, and the thing that I've made that, the one element that I've mainly stuck at. But I was sketching always with the boys, and we had, the sketches up in the house and hip hop playing. And it really was, in its rawest form, just, like an extension of that. And so when people would mess with us or whatever, we obviously wanted to be the realest. We wanted to, make sure that people knew about that. And the reputation in line with the music, in line with the graph, that was the big thing for me. And obviously I found it frustrating when boys would obviously, like we're just talking about, get on the gear, because they'd forget about all that, or they'd go and do stupid things, like some of the crimes some of my mates ended up doing. It was a great reference point when you're on the phone to them in jail a few weeks later. It's like, bro, you keep getting on this. You're trying to get off it. Look what you did while you're on it. That's not you, bro. You're not going into someone's house and, stomping on their head and taking all their stuff. Like, that's not you, bro. You know what I mean? And that's just the stuff that I kept seeing and was around. And to be honest, I think the biggest thing that I've thought about is I actually thought, as much as I was a part of it, I kind of thought that I could still be a good influence just because I wasn't on that level. And that was the big mistake that I made. And I was still trying to go to church and still trying to sort of keep two sides happy, and it just wasn't working because they're obviously, my mates are rapidly escalating. By the age of 19, 20, they're all getting locked up. At one point it was just me and one other mate. We had like 5 of our other mates all locked up. And I just thought to myself, well, that's where I'm going to end up. I'm not helping them. It's actually getting worse. I finally realised, and it kind of took my house getting raided, pretty seriously. And finally, it was the law looking at me, not just them. All of a sudden the spotlight was on me and was like, this is on you now. And that was a really hectic situation. And I kind of look back in my life as that was a big turning point. Them kicking down my door, me getting into trouble was like, whoa, this is not just a game where I get to be this cool hip hop guy and my mates all get in trouble and I try to help them. This is me being held accountable. And it didn't matter what drug I was taking. I was in that environment, and I did, and was involved in something that meant that they were showing up my door, pointing guns in my face. So
that, would you say, was the wake up call?
Big time.
So then how did you turn it round from there to leave that existence, even though you still love your hip hop and you're a rapper? But how did you turn that around?
It was very hard. It was probably then one of the darkest times of my life. I think while you're in it, it doesn't feel as dark. You're kind of in and amongst it every day and you find ways to distract yourself. And me smoking a lot of weed was always about dulling some of my past trauma and dealing with things. And so when I realised I had to stop doing that, I quit weed around that time. It was so hard to suddenly be dealing with everything. Couldn't sleep at night, would have terrible nightmares. So there was that, and then there was all of my mates who were looking at me like, well, why aren't you still here for me? It's funny that the time I got raided, I'd actually tried to sort of, probably a couple months before that, had already tried to start steering the ship. And then without going into too much detail, because it's probably a good 30-minute story, what happened, it was by still saying, all right, just come over, but don't do that, is what it, kind of led to me getting raided that day. And it was a real serious situation. So it was me realizing I'm trying to steer the ship, I'm trying to change things, but by still allowing that bad company into my life, I can't manage it. I can't manage what these guys are going to do anymore. I'm trying to get clean. I'm trying to, do my music. And, I kept the job somehow through all that time. So I was trying to do these things. And it was like, boys, I actually can't do this anymore. And it was one of the hardest things I had to do, but I had to show the door to a lot of my mates. And I think I probably did it in a way that was okay, because to this day, that now that some of them have come full circle, or even some of them are still in there, some of them still love me and I still love them. So I obviously maintained still being mates while also showing them the door. And I think it was more them understanding that you guys got to go do what you do, I got to do what I got to do now. So yeah, that was a tough one.
It's an interesting story. It's actually reminded me of one of our previous episodes talking about kind of the whole trauma thing and addiction and how they kind of interplay with each other. And a lot of people just kind of pin addiction back to trauma or childhood trauma. It's like And for a lot of your story sounds more influence.
Yeah.
Which is always my counter argument, because there's always going to be trauma, which, you know, we use substances and it's a great band-aid for a long time or whatever. But, you know, for a lot of people, it's like the home that you grow up in is truly a sanctuary.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, you know, you only got that sanctuary and then you got to leave at some point, and then there's influence.
Yeah.
You know, and your parents can't control what the outside world does.
And you're right, like around, I think I was close to about when I turned 21 was around that, just after that time. And I ended up moving back home after 4 years of trying to live out by myself. And being back there was the best. Just, you know, mum cooking meals and not having to deal with people. But I think I had become a product of that. And so I think initially my family found me hard at times. You know, like I'd get a bit staunch to my brothers, and they're younger, and, you know, they were obviously becoming men at that time, but they're like, whoa, you know what I mean? Like, usually it's you having our back, but I think living with me, I had really definitely taken on some bad habits, and, you know, that being in the street for so long and having to be so on my toes and ready to go and ready to run and ready to fight in the house, you know, they just turned around and were like, you got to go if you can't sort this out. And so I think really getting back into the church at that time and taking my faith seriously was my biggest rehabilitation, you know, like having it there to sort of direct me and something to have people within the church to talk to. And I was lucky that there were people there that had been through similar things, and yeah, that was my big support.
Community.
Yep.
Yeah, well, it's, you know, you kind of walked back off the street into the sanctuary, met with love, connection,
Maslow's.
back into spirituality, all these great things, like all the pillars that make a great individual.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, it's the essence of what makes a good recovery too.
Yeah.
You know, great connection, good family support, a good level of spirituality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just, it's an all-round good environment.
Yeah, I mean, like
Very lucky.
you think about that. One of the biggest challenges all of our clients have faced in the past that we've worked with, and now in the business we have, in the sector you're in, is at the start when you have to turn it around, you have to walk away from the friends that you have.
Yeah.
There's no option. You don't walk away from them, then you continue in the same thing. Nothing changes if nothing changes,
Well,
right?
it's just a law of association.
Yeah.
You hang around 9 dickheads, you're going to be the 10th.
Yeah, but what's
Sorry, but it's the
what's
truth.
interesting is that you had a community ready-made for you to go back to transfer away from the friends you had to leave behind so you could move forward. A lot of people don't have that, which is, I guess, where things like the church, NAAA or boxing programs and so many other things, where there's ready-made communities for you to go and transition into, but you have to leave behind the past to create the future in the present. Right?
And the church, like, to their credit, like, they knew all my mates. They were coming with me to church.
Yeah.
You know, we'd run amok all week and then rock up on a Sunday sober. You know, that was the rule. And we loved it. You know, some of my mates got fully indoctrinated into the church, and I saw one of my mates who'd been addicted for years be clean for 8 months.
Yeah.
You know, and unfortunately, all it took was one slip up for him to go back inside for 3 years. You know, so there was a lot of heartbreak with that. And I think, going back to what I said before, if I wasn't willing to change myself, church wasn't going to help them. If anything, I was actually probably stopping them from really getting the help they needed, because we were doing one thing and then coming to church just for the community.
Literally like a cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
You're just living two different things, right?
Yeah.
All right, I'm just mindful of the time. So I just wanted to understand a little bit more outside of understanding that the hip hop and that was kind of also what brought you in. But obviously now, as you got out, you've kept the rapping side.
Yep.
So you love rap music. Tell us about Oli G.
Yeah. I think there was an original Oli G, which was the man we've been talking about, the young man that was very angry and wanted to be tough and wanted to be, just like I said before, that's so hip hop, you know, that's so real, and people could see that, you know, and then obviously going through what we just spoke about, coming on the other side, I didn't really write or rap for a while, You know, I remember me and my family were lucky enough to save up and go to Europe around that time, you know, when I'd sort of been getting my life back on track. And I was in Europe and I thought I'd be super inspired, but I kind of just wasn't, you know, and I kind of just let it go for a while. And it was probably a couple of years before I started really thinking like, okay, like, yes, this culture influenced me a lot and I saw the dark side of it. Well, who's going to be there to represent the light? You know, because my life had changed rapidly. People were, I ended up working for the church, you know, like I was really in there and doing the ministry stuff but was still dressing the same, was still listening to, I obviously tried to be a little bit more careful with the music I listened to because I wanted to find stuff that was influencing me better. And there's plenty of hip hop out there. Unfortunately, it's just not always the most popular stuff. And so
it's more normally the underground stuff. Like,
it's true.
Like for me, maybe a bit older than you, but Jurassic 5 and, you know, things like that, that was real hip hop.
Tribe Called Quest, all of these, you can go all the way back. Gangstar.
African Bambaataa, DJ Premier, Gangstar. That was all the underground hip hop. Even now with that mad lad, my brain's gone with it now anyway, but he's well known in the underground. He raps real fast. Does stuff with Brother Ali and all that.
Okay.
Now I can't remember his name.
There's a few guys, and eventually I think now some of those guys are coming through because people just respect the art.
Oh, R.A. Rugged Man, that's it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, he raps on some real heavy, yeah. But yeah, for me it was like, all right, well, can I do this?
Yep.
And so I started getting back in the studio. Some of the boys from church had sort of come out of that life as well, and shout out to my big brother Rush One, who was one of the guys at church who'd fully come from that whole life and done it for a whole decade, and loved his rap, and was a huge mentor to me. Started making music again, started putting more of a positive message out there, and that's where it kind of started all over again. And probably, I've gone through waves of, being super active to not as active, moving to Adelaide. And at first I didn't know many people in the scene. But once I got hooked up with some of the Delhi Records boys, Delicacies, and started recording a track here and there, and sort of on the probably ready to take off with an album this year. So
yeah, sick.
Yeah.
You do freestyle?
Yeah.
Do you? Do you do freestyle?
Of course, man. I've always been able to freestyle.
You got 16 bars?
Yeah, completely freestyle, like off the top.
Yeah.
All right, can give you something. Yeah.
How'd you like that? You didn't see that coming, did you, Lockdog?
That's a full-on surprise.
That's random, yeah, okay.
Hey, yo, check it. Proper freestyle. All right, let's do it. Hey, yo, check it. Hey, yo, check. Yo, it's Oli G. Yo, up in the scene, in Elizabeth here, ready to spit it free, yeah, we're going. Yo, I always keep it flowing, progression in your life, man, it's gotta be ongoing. This is freestyle, Oli G style, it's been a while, keep it tight like a missile. Ready to go, ready to flow, ready to show that I'm here in the studio with a couple of my bros. That's Danny Lloyd and my man Locker B, Lock Dog, we up, yeah, we ready to go off, that's what's up. Got my man Fiend MC coming through, ready to spit hip-hop philosophies. A little stumble keeps me humble. All these rappers nowadays is mumble jumble. In the jungle, don't need no muscle. I'm here ready to spit and get my bundle. Yeah, what up? Shout out almighty crew, to all my brothers. Yo, I know what you've been through. Yeah, shout out to Inside Out. We be here ready, had to give them a shout. What up?
Everyone wants to rule the world, motherfucker. Woo! That's freestyle with Oli G.
Yeah.
Nice one, butter. Love that shit, bro.
Fire.
Like that? That was a first for the InsideOutrz podcast.
That was a shot in from the left.
Yeah, I thought I would just absolutely disrupt the whole thing. And I was just sitting there listening to you, and I thought, you know what? If he's as mad as I think he is, he'll love this. He'll hate me for it, but he'll love it.
Always ready, man. You always got to be ready.
Geezer. All right, we're going to jump into the news of the week.
Go for it.
And then we're going to wrap this up with some final questions for the Mr. Oli G. It certainly is, and we are back again for your favourite segment. And I hope you have a strong stomach, or you have definitely going to lose something listening to this one, because a couple of weeks back it was Easter in Sydney.
That is correct.
And back there was a feral food combo that went viral ahead of the Easter show opening. An unlikely food duo had gone viral ahead of the Sydney Royal Easter show opening after a photo of the feral combination was posted to Reddit. Are you ready for this?
Oh, let's hear it.
Gummy bear loaded fries is the latest wacky food available at the Sydney Royal Easter show.
That ain't it, bro.
It's the new sensation where gummy bears melt on the fries, Jade Evans, the creator of Neon Alley, said. Krispy Kreme chicken burgers and neon Dagwood dogs are also available.
Ooh.
Reddit users called it feral and a crime. And the original Reddit poster said he got the dish for free. I don't think you could even give it away, personally. Showgoers will have to pay for it, though, when they went. But this particular Reddit poster said their daughter picked out some of the gummy bears before throwing the rest away. What is actually wrong with us? Gummy bears melted onto fries.
I agree with the Reddit comments. But then in saying that, after talking about all the weed, and I think back to my teenage years,
well, I was going to say,
would have eaten it.
I was going to say that, to be fair, if you are really high and stoned, you'd almost eat anything if it's there, eh?
It could have been the person that invented this may well have been stoned when they came up with that.
I would suggest so, because that is...
It's a stoner creation right there.
It's on another level, really, when you consider it, eh? I mean, yeah, I just try and process that and think about the textures even. And at the Sydney show, like, you got to have some brass ones to be pushing that. Christ.
I guess it's Sydney, bro.
And honestly,
it is. I guess it's Sydney. That's very true.
And on a sad note, I don't want to go way back to what we were talking about before, but it was quite sad that I think someone got stabbed at that Easter show.
Oh, yeah, actually, you're right. Something that did happen, eh?
And that's just crazy. That's where those worlds collide again. You know,
Yeah.
Streets, church, Easter show, you know, just, pretty sad.
Yeah, almost as sad as gummy bears on
A bit sad.
fries. A bit sadder than that, but yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, there you go. Pull your fucking head in, bruv. Pull your fucking head in, bruv. All right.
Loves it.
Let's get back to the final parts. Lock Dog.
We're going to rapid fire this because we're going to wrap it up.
Let's do it.
All right. So when we first originally spoke, you mentioned that you were, well, actually wrapping up your psychology degree. Is that right?
Yeah, no, probably not ready to wrap it up just yet, but I'm a decent way through Bachelor of Psychology with Macquarie University. Something I've done sporadically, like a lot of online study, because, you know, as I mentioned, I've always been living out of home. But yeah, I'm definitely keen to get that finished in the next couple of years if possible, because I'm working full time and married now. So
Congratulations on the marriage.
yes.
I've seen you and your wife from Dan Dog. Dan's post. We're going to bring him in at the end so you can see old Dan Ossie's been sitting there quietly just cheering away on the sidelines. But I see your wife and you look like an absolutely stunning couple, in so much love and appreciation for each other. And so congratulations on finding somebody. I see the same with the Lock Dog and his partner. It's a beautiful thing to see. Must be the Dans of the world just must be unlovable, eh? We'll just stay on our own little thing.
Hey, my brother Dan's in the same boat, so the three of you need to work something out.
Oh, there you go.
I just think some of us are made to cuddle one and some are made to cuddle many. Go out there and cuddle them all, bro.
Well, that's it. That's the same reason why when people ask me why I don't want kids, I'm like, I've got 7.6 billion of them. Like, I got to help them all. I've got to raise them all.
That's it, bro.
All right,
Sorry.
back to the topic.
Yeah.
Thank you for that little
All right,
trivial
back
thing,
in the
yeah.
box.
Back in the box.
So I'm curious.
Yeah.
Psychology, I love the topic.
Yeah.
What do you plan on doing with all of that education?
To be honest, my mum was really big on trying to find something that I could study. She has studied a lot while we were growing up, and while I was a teen, she was still studying, and she's done anthropology, so a lot about culture and all that. And she's eventually wants to become a doctor. She's already got a master's, so she's on her way, and she's just non-stop. She says, even if you don't end up using it exactly in your role, it's so great to have. It's such an achievement. And I used to just tell her what she wanted to hear, but now in the last couple of years, stepping into, the field that you guys know what I do, supporting people, through, addiction or whatever, and psychology has a big part to play, and realizing that there's more roles than just being a clinical, psychologist, because that's a lot of the advice I got. That's the only role. You're going to have to do 8 years of study, where I found out that even that bachelor's degree, especially within the NDIS and a lot of the, just the field that I'm in now, a bachelor degree can get you into some awesome roles. So I think it's just been realizing that there's some realistic options for me, that it would just, wouldn't define who I was, but it'll give me a huge hand in just being able to, really go shoot for the moon within my career. So.
And how much have you learned about yourself on the way? I think it's always incredible when you study anything around the human mind, or, just what makes us tick, what you learn about you. Even if like a lot of people just do it for them, like I want to know why whatever's wrong with me, I'm going to do this degree, and a lot of them end up going on to help others, because it's like, actually my problems are everyone's problems. Yeah. Because we're all very similar. We all think, we're unique and only we suffer when we're in suffering, but like guaranteed your neighbour's probably gone through it too. Yep. So you kind of go like, now understand me, now understand everyone else. Now I'm going to go and heal them all.
It can be uncomfortable, man, studying psychology. Personally, it's people always say whenever I've brought it up, oh, what do you study? Psychology. Oh, so can you read my mind? That's like the go-to, and it's like, well, no. But it's more about, there's a lot of self-reflection that goes on. No matter the topics I've gone through, I end up studying addiction only sort of 18 months out of my own serious addiction, and realising that every human's got addictions. It can be the gym, it can be anything. Sometimes we see them as positive ones, but everyone's got it. You know what I mean? And
thank you for saying that. Thank you.
We're all addicts, whether people like it or not. And I know you guys talk a lot about the stigma around that word, but really studying psychology and having some really relatable lecturers out at Macquarie. Not like they're smoking joints while giving the lectures, but more just, not having those stigmas, being more compassionate and understanding about it, I think really opened my eyes and actually made me feel a bit better. I stopped being so hard on myself and realised that, well, it's actually about just moving forward and doing the right things versus labelling myself. There is a lot within psychology. There's a lot of things that are outdated. The reasons why a lot of drugs today are illegal is because they tested them on mice back in the 60s. Or 40s, or probably even before that. That's pretty outdated, So not to say that they shouldn't all be, some may still need to be illegal, but there's a lot of outdated stuff. So there's a very conservative side to the psychology field, and there's obviously a more progressive side that's not saying everyone get on drugs, but, this happens, people are doing it. We've got to be realistic about this in our approach to recovery and helping people.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I think that there is definitely a shift from the draconian, dark-aged psychology approach, and I think there's a lot more of that mind-body connection and holistic approaches to psychology, like holistic and psychology going together. Yeah. That new age approach stuff, which it's very exciting, because I feel like in our lifetime, I think we will be talking about addiction openly like we now do about mental health. I really truly believe it. It's one of the biggest goals I've had in my head from day dot, is to influence that and to create an army of people that influence that. I mean, this is why we called our business Inside Out Coaching and Consultancy Collective. We want to partner and continue to grow the mission with like-minded peoples like yourselves and other businesses, so that we create a voice so loud that they can't not listen.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. And a lot is changing slowly, which is cool, and I like that goal. Yeah, it's pretty admirable of you guys to really tackle that.
Oh, we're all doing it. It's just, it's something that we sat down and set as an intention of like our why. Yeah. Like we can go and help one person at a time, that's great. But
There's a bigger
It doesn't
picture.
feel like it's going to it's going to work, right? We'll still save lives, but
One at a time.
I mean, I'm not interested in talking about history. I want to make it.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I want to be able to know that in 15, 20 years time, like if something ever happened to one of your children, they can talk openly straight about it while they're suffering the addiction, not be stuck in the shadows like we've probably all had in our lives, you know?
Yeah, well, it on average, people struggle or battle with addiction for a good 20 odd years before they seek treatment.
Yeah.
That's because of stigma,
Yeah.
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 which is concerning because you imagine being chronically depressed for 20 years. That's not really a thing.
By that point, it's
Yeah.
pretty bad. And
Well,
there's
it's insanity nearly
Yeah.
at that point.
Yeah.
So
All right, moving on. If you had the attention of the whole world for 5 minutes, what would you say?
I saw this question. It's probably the only question I didn't prepare for because I thought, you know what? It's the type of question that I feel like you got to just do it on the fly.
I think so.
Or if you were to give, we'll frame it another way, if you were to give the whole world a message,
Yeah.
something you just wanted everyone to hear, that you
Yeah.
like everyone has their thoughts, like, I just wish I could tell everyone this information.
Go
Or-
listen to the new Oli G album. No, I'm only joking.
Don't make me drop that beat again.
Yeah, 70% would go whack. Nah, I think honestly, it's a really daunting sort of question. I liked Israel Adesanya the other day. You know, after his fight, he goes, "Give me the mic," and he's like, "Attention, Earth, people." You know, it's almost like he didn't have the whole world, but he had a fair chunk watching.
He had a lot of millions, and he used it very well.
And I was like, wow, you know, like that sort of moment, you know, for anybody is huge. And he spoke so confidently. And yeah, for me, I think I'd be a little nervous. But I think the biggest thing that I would talk about, and this might come out super cliched and I don't really care, but you just got to love one another, you know. And I've heard you talk about that a fair bit, and obviously a big part to do with my faith. What's the most, you know, important command in the Bible is love your God and love your neighbor, you know. And so many people, including a lot of Christians, unfortunately, get that so wrong. And it all becomes about image, and whether it's religion, politics, so many areas where it all becomes about us again. And probably one of the biggest things I've learned in the last 6 months, especially being married to my beautiful wife, it's realizing how selfish I am as a person. And a lot of people tell me, you know, through my work or through church, oh, you know, you're so giving, you're so selfless. But yeah, maybe in some ways, but there's a lot of areas that I am super selfish. And so I think if I had an opportunity to give a message, I'd say just love other people first. You know, I do hear a lot of people, and I'm not saying it's wrong to say love yourself so much. But I think my message is, you know, what I've been learning has been more about love other people first. Obviously, you got to give yourself some attention, but yeah, love your neighbor, you know, and whoever that is, whether it's someone that's easy to love or not. Don't just love people that are easy to love. Yeah, and obviously, yeah, there's always a place to look after yourself. I get that, but that'd be my message, something about that.
Yeah, nice.
Just give more love.
Yeah.
You reap what you sow, man.
I mean, like, you know, I think people deserve love the most. I think people need to be loved the most when they deserve it the least.
Yeah, that's huge. And, you know, don't want to go, you know, too much into my faith, but I see that in the Bible, you know, like one of my favourite stories in there is when Jesus is dying on the cross, he's got two criminals on either side of him. And one of them starts giving him a bit of a hard time, saying, why can't you save us? Come on, if you're the Son of God, you know, and starts just hammering him. And then the guy on the other side just goes, hey, you know, leave him alone. This is the Son of God. We're the criminals. We're here because we did the wrong thing, you know, and this guy's actually innocent. Jesus turns around and says, truly, I tell you, today you'll be with me in paradise. And whether you believe in God or not, it's a touching story because it's like this guy may have lived a really bad life. He'd obviously, they say he's either murderer or robber. That's the final thing that he did, and he's getting executed. And, you know, I believe the Son of God turned around to him and said, you know, you've done that whole life, but through that one act of love that you just showed me, you'll be in heaven with me today.
Yeah.
And it makes me almost want to cry, you know, because it's just like, that's the sort of love that if more people could even show little glimpses of that. Someone cuts you off on the road, all good. You know, like someone, you know, is in a bit of a rush and, you know, in the shopping market and they sneak in front, like whatever, you know what I mean? And we all get caught up in those moments. Don't get me wrong, I can be the worst for it. But just in those little moments, just going, maybe this guy's had a shocking day.
Yeah.
Maybe he's found out something. And just being able to show that is, I think, would make the world such a better place.
100%. So what's one thing that you are most grateful for right now in life? I reckon I know the answer, but tell me.
My wife.
There we go. I knew it.
My beautiful wife, Tamara. Very grateful for her. Actually known her for 10 years. So actually knew me through that whole process that we've spoken about, my whole story. I actually took her on a date around the time when I was in the thick of it, and she reckons it was the worst date she ever went on. And so if you want to know about a comeback story, come talk to me another time about how I somehow went from giving her worst date to obviously her best date. And
I like that. That's quite a metaphor in itself. So she's seen you at your worst.
She did.
And still thought you were the best.
Yeah, at the time she thought I was the worst, but she saw something in me. She refers to it as, the old gangster Oli, thought he was so tough. And she goes, now nobody knows your secret that you're the biggest softie ever. She always says that to me. And she goes, imagine if all your hip hop mates could see you right now and stuff like that. And I just own it, like she's brought out in one of my recent tracks, I know we're short for time, so just to summarize it, I had a line where it was like, and I got my wifey right beside me. I got her back, she's got mine. She found that side of me that was hidden deep inside for my life's entirety. Now I fight for my family tirelessly. And it's just that idea of like, she brought something out in me that I probably wanted to just keep behind closed doors and maybe just with mum and dad and my brothers. But that's who I really am, like someone who is a family man. I've got, a bunch of niece and nephews all over the world, now since marrying her. And
a Rottweiler.
And a Roddy. Little Leon. Got to give Leon a shout out. He's my son.
See, I did my research.
Oh, mate,
I did my research.
Yeah, my little Roddy is 10 months old. He's in, and he's been a big thing for us, like we obviously want to have a family one day, and we thought, well, having a little pup will be a great way to obviously test us and,
I'll
see
keep
how
it
we
alive
go.
and then you're ready for the kids.
That's it, man. Yeah.
All
but
right.
definitely tomorrow.
Okay.
All right. Is there a question that we didn't ask you today that you wish we had have asked you? If so, what was it?
That's another really good question. I didn't prepare for it. I thought, what's it going to be on the fly? I was hoping at some point that you'd ask something to do with tomorrow, but then, the question before kind of covered that. But yeah, just like, maybe who's the real Oli, and even through my music, I think even at the moment, as I'm starting to put this album together, I'm really conscious about, is this a true reflection of me? Is there a part of me that's still trying to, be that tough guy? And, the truth is like, that was me, and there's a part of me now, like when things pop up in life, I definitely I'm not a pushover, and I think a great way for me to express that and let things out is I also play footy. So I play for the mighty Paynham Falcons down the road, and footy's a great way for me to exert myself, because that's a time when you need to be tough. When you're down by a couple goals and things aren't going your way, or you get a big hit and you got to get back up. And I kind of gave up footy in the first place because it was on Sundays. Around 16, I had a lot of opportunity to maybe, make a career out of it. And it was on Sundays, and I eventually just gave it up. And then moving to Adelaide, I felt like through my faith, I was sort of giving it back. It was like, oh, why can't I play footy now? It's on Saturdays. And the last 4 years, it's been a big part of my journey as well, having that sense of community, because I didn't know many people in Adelaide. So having all my mates down there and having an awesome club to be a part of has been awesome. So yeah, I think that's the real Oli as well, is I like to be a tough guy on the footy field, but... Yeah,
but I mean, everybody has to be competitive. It's not tough. It's just you have to be competitive on a football or any sports field. But yeah, I mean, that's definitely when I met you, I thought you were very soft. Kind of kind-hearted human being. I mean, I could see the eyes. Like I know the eyes. I know what's behind the eyes can be there if it had to be. Yeah. But I always felt that you were just quite soft-hearted and kind.
Well, I think to anyone listening, if they want to know who the real Oli is, grab some of his music.
Yeah, definitely. 100%.
Music is an expression and it's an extension of who we are.
Yeah.
Give it a listen. You'll hear a bit about who Oli is.
Yeah. And it's not me singing there Kumbaya, you know what I mean? Like,
no.
I talk about the realness of life, but I really appreciate that, bro. Like, it's sort of... my genre is hip hop, and it's a tough one, and you got to have a certain level of an edge about you to step into that arena. It's a blood sport, in my opinion. Like hip hop is really, it's not for the faint-hearted. But I've realized that I just don't need to be that angry tough kid anymore.
Nah.
I can be myself and be confident in who I am, and anyone that questions that, all good, man. go listen to someone else.
Yeah,
You know, like, it's all
no,
good.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
90% of my hip hop that I've done, and George has been to a few of my gigs.
Yep.
It's got nothing to do with aggression at all. I try and even rap the way I am.
Yep.
I think I do mainly. There's been a couple of tracks where I'm just cutting heads off.
Yeah.
But that's just the
Part
other
of the
side of
game.
hip hop.
It's part of the game. And to
Yeah.
quote the great man Jizzo, you guys probably don't know who that is, but
Jizzo?
you know Jizzo,
Yeah.
the documentary,
Yeah.
the graph guy.
Yeah.
A real man's a family man.
There you go.
You know, as much as that guy showed the whole world that his life was pretty messed up, that's
Yeah.
a great quote. So
what can people expect from you next?
yeah, look, you know, I'm working at the moment and footy season's kicked off, but I'm also very focused on this album. You know, I've been talking about it.
Do you have a name for it yet?
Well, the interesting thing is, I do. You know, the album is going to be called Reprisal.
Nice.
But may change. And I know that doesn't sound very like adamant, but the thing is, I was planning to do sort of 2 albums. I know, you know, if you can't do one, why would you do 2? But just with the production, Donnie the Chief from Kings Connected is, you know, ended up getting so many beats through him. It was
Yep.
kind of like a nice little album. So it may be 1 album with him, Reprisal, and just try to get that out in the next few months and then focus on something a bit different. Or it may just be all the best of the 1 album. So
Almost sounds like you could have 2 albums. One is your alter ego and one's you.
yeah, well, yeah, it'd be hard to. But there's
2 different stories from the
Yeah.
from the same sides of the track.
And it's, you know, and probably instead of an alter ego, it's almost me like going into that mindset
Yeah.
to share the story. You
Yeah.
know, like my rap voice doesn't even sound like it did back when I used to rap. I listen to it, and I'm like, man, why was I so angry? But I just, you know, and I'm much happier with how I sound on the mic now. So it'd take a bit of effort to come
Yeah.
through.
I get
I do no, but you're onto something. It is a bit like that. I do delve into some of that because I want to share my story. But like we spoke about earlier, instead of it being something that, you know, puts people down the wrong track, I want it to be hopefully something that people can hold on to, take something out of it.
When you were saying about having this almost 2 album thing, I
Yeah.
just thought of Jordan.
Yep.
Like as in the complete the
Complete's
rapper.
track, yeah.
So his track Jordan.
Yep.
Where he's literally like talking to the good and the bad side of him.
Yeah.
And I don't know why. Just what it sounds.
I've thought of ideas like that, and
Yeah.
there may be something in there, but yeah.
Anyway.
that's what's next for me. That's
Okay.
going to be the big thing. Got some great production by it. You know, I rep the Almighty crew, which is a bunch of my brothers who do a few different things collectively, but mainly hip hop orientated, and a few of them are jumping on. My man here, MC Fiend's going to be featured on there.
Yeah, come
Big
on
Danny.
in here. Bring the chair over here,
Come over
Dan.
here, Danny.
Let's come and finish off with us here because we're nearly done, and he's been sitting here blessing the whole time.
Yeah.
Put the wide lens on. He's a
You have
big
to
boy.
come in here further this way.
Come over here,
'cause
come over
there he is. There
Here's
he
my man.
is.
To
There
the
he
camera.
is.
It's my man.
There we are.
He's jumping on. He's got some ill bars.
Yeah.
Got the bro Rush, who I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
My bro Benny Man, who does Nature, which is a big brand. And yeah, it's
Cool.
going to be, I won't say any more. 'Cause
Nah,
it's going to
all
be
right.
a surprise.
All right. Well, only leaves one question then, Lock Dog.
It sure does. What does living from the inside out mean to you?
Yeah. That's your guys' brand, you know, and it's, I've actually not really sat down and let you guys explain it yourself. So I'm not, you know, this is not a copy and paste answer. I think when I thought about it and, you know, from watching your guys' podcasts, I think it's working out what's in the inside before you try to display something on the outside, you know, and that may be a little bit different to exactly what you guys know it as. But I know a lot of what you guys talk about is working out what's in here and working on that and taking care of that. And so important. You know what I mean? It's so very important. And I think for me, through my whole journey, I had to stop projecting who I was to everybody and had to go, hang on, what's actually in here? And it's a scary place to look, you know, like,
It is.
whoa, am I actually who I say I am? And as you mentioned earlier, I lived a double life a lot. And I think living from the inside out means take care of what's in here first. Don't worry about what other people see. Don't worry about putting on an image, trying to be tough, trying to be someone you're not. It's exhausting and it can take time away. It may be a lesson, but make sure you learn from that lesson and stop doing it. So,
Can I just say one thing to the lads?
Yeah.
I came across Danny Lloyd back in 2014 in Alice Springs when I was in the depths of my addiction. And, since then I've been to prison, I've got clean and sober, and I've completely changed my life. And now I've had the pleasure of meeting up with Oli G, and having these people in my life has just been, an incredible thing. And, you know, if you think you can't come back from the depths of addiction, you definitely can, because I'm living proof of that.
Yeah.
And just having, you know, being able to rock up here after all these years and be around these lads and have these people in my life, it's one of the best things you can ever imagine.
That's a beautiful, beautiful testament, and I appreciate that, Dan. Me and you walked some paths together back then, and yeah, it's phenomenal to have watched your growth since then. When you were up in remote communities there for a while, because he's an amazing chef as well, but he's an amazing human being, and he's never let his past define his future. So just an inside outer right here.
Right here.
Man.
That's
Oh,
it.
that's what I thought when you asked that question. I thought that'd probably be something good to say. So.
No, that's cool. I appreciate that, brother.
Yeah.
Well, lads, it's been epic.
Yeah.
We've had all sorts of firsts on here. We've had guests on guests. We've had freestyles, and we've had all of the goodness that comes in between. So before we exit, I want to say thank you to our sponsors, Killer Moe's, and also 5-Star Classifieds. You can check the link to them below. But we will say goodbye to Oli G.
Stay fresh, keep it real. He's always going to be with me because he's my boy. That's it. This is how we roll.
Goodbye to Mr. Daniel Mulvihill.
Keep it real, fellas.
Thanks, boys. Love you guys.
It's TTFN and ta-ta for now from me.
And that's all from the Lock Dog.
Yeah.
See you next time. And thank you for listening. And don't forget, if we want to continue to grow, you can help us grow by hitting the subscribe and like button so that we can keep helping others help others.
Drop a comment. Do what you got to do. Just,
That's the
people got
one.
to support. That's how we do it.
Thank you.
Let's go.
Represent.
Nobody is gonna hit as hard as life. But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how
See you
winning
next
is
time
done.
for the InsideOutrz podcast.